everybody. All the best to you. We're back with Life's Learning Curve Podcast, Season 2, Show 21. Last, 2 or 3 weeks, I've been kind of on the sidelines with bronchitis. I'm much better now. Feel better. Went to the doctor. Got myself a Z-Pack, antibiotic, and I found myself for a few days just sitting there staring, thinking about nothing. But it's funny, when you do that, something popped into my head. I had a memory flash about a story I hadn't thought of for years, and it made me actually laugh out loud. And the more I thought about it, the more it seemed less likely that this story adventure actually took place, but it did. So, this all-new True How We Became Us story we're going to retell today on Life's Learning Curve. Please comment or subscribe to us, or to listen to us, read our blog, find extended info or deeper show notes. We're at our website, lifeslearningcurve.org. Please subscribe. We'd love to have you.
They picked me out of the crowd.
A lot of people could learn lessons from our parents' generation.
You know, fill your rooms up with people that love you, folks.
So after all, it wasn't so bad getting hit in the head with a baseball bat.
Daddy was going running like a wild dog.
From childhood, all your stories, you remember telling them at a shorter height.
Now that's value, Life's Learning Curve. And on today's podcast, I desperately wanted a road trip. Something to initiate myself into the romance of the open road. My friend Fred and I had both read On the Road by Jack Kerouac, where the two main characters are admired for their carefree attitudes and their sense of adventure. I wanted to be eager to explore all kinds of things and be an inspiration to other people. On the road. Today, I'm glad you're here with us. You're in for an awesome kind of unbelievable true story. I once spent a week of my life at age 16 out on the road and never spent a dime or a cent. This story ranges from meeting fraternity brothers to interacting with really laid-back camp counselors, plus a whole lot more. Let's get started. Life's Learning Curve. I'm Paul Hart. Coming up, my Kerouac summer. Stand by. It was spring and the year was 1972. At age 15, my good friend Fred Larson and I were writing and performing music. We were solidly connected by our love for music and the new cutting-edge humor that we were hearing. We had already been heavily influenced by Fred's older brother, Steve. He was a college fraternity president at the time, about to study law. When listening to Steve's record albums, Fred and I broke down each song into digestible chunks.
I really like the bridge in that song.
Yeah, and the vocals. I really like the refrain on track 2 and side 1.
Ripping that guitar.
When we listened to Steve's comedy albums, the humor was more personal and had this very intentional young feel to it. We listened to a troupe of 20-something humorists calling themselves Firesign Theater, not knowing the huge influence and massive success these writers and performers were about to claim. We became hooked on their approach to comedic content. In tandem, Fred and I read the ironic, deeply mature, at least for a junior high school kid, and sarcastic stories from a magazine purchased by Steve called The National Lampoon. This publication was a mix of kind of witty, intelligent, cutting-edge humor combined with some really crass, bawdy, jesting stuff. It was a really interesting mix. Later, this magazine spawned films, radio, live theater.
Yeah, I always read Chris Miller's stories on college life. Like his stuff.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I like Doug Kenny, what Doug Kenny writes, and Harold Ramis, his content. It's really funny.
Yeah.
These were different from the mundane humorists and current comedians from television. It was like being in on a huge inside joke. Many members of the creative staff from the National Lampoon magazine went on to contribute creatively and as performers to successful media of all types. People like John Belushi, Chevy Chase, Gilda Radner, Bill Murray, Brian Doyle Murray, Harold Ramis, and Richard Belzer, just to name a few. Fred's brother Steve was a great guy, and still is. On several occasions, he had told Fred and me,
Why don't you guys come down and see me at the fraternity house? Come to the University of Illinois campus in Champaign. You can stay the weekend at the Chi Psi house. Guys are really great.
Steve was president of his fraternity house that year, and he was quite proud of his fraternity brothers.
The Chi Psi frat brothers are just a great bunch of guys, and they're really laid back and thoughtful and funny and open-minded. They're a bunch of great guys. I know they wouldn't mind if you and Fred came down for the weekend. I'm pretty sure you can't get into the bars, but I'll take you guys downtown and show you around.
Now that lure got both Fred's and my attention. Getting into bars never happened at that age for us, nor did we expect it to happen.
The bars?
It was just a cool older brother kind of thing to have said.
Wow.
We weren't alcohol drinkers yet, nor did we really want to be, but the prestige and the brag of that, claiming to go to University of Illinois and go to a bar, was huge, even if we just stood outside of it and never went in.
So what'd you do last weekend?
Me? What did I do last weekend? Oh, my friend and I went to the bars at University of Illinois. We had fun.
We never said we went in. But because of school and our jobs and just life itself at age 16, neither of us took Steve up on that college visit. We talked a lot about it, but it just wasn't in the cards. Later that summer of 1972, I was still 15, of course, and I attended band camp for 2 weeks at the University of Illinois in Champaign, Illinois. When I say band, I'm referring to the type of band, the music that performs traditional classical type music, like the schools. Now, just a few blocks away was Steve Larson's fraternity house. I knew about it, but I didn't even try to go there during my 2-week stay. The counselors and the staff had us busy every minute of the day with sectionals, 2 massive full band rehearsals for 2.5 hours each day, and mandatory social events we had to go to, such as the nightly movie, 4th of July fireworks, walks to the downtown area as a large group. They had dances for us, along with 3 meals a day. When it was time to sleep, we slept. Now, band camp has that stigma about it, about being kind of lame and embarrassing. So when I was encouraged to attend that summer band camp by my junior high school's band director, his name was Mr. Rausch, I was kind of hesitant. However, Mr. Rausch told me,
Paul, the value of this 2-week stint is enormous. If you go, you'll have these amazing top-notch instructors that'll take your playing to another level. You gotta trust me on this.
I thought. Maybe. And also, so many of my junior high school friends, now called middle school friends, were going as well. So we all knew that we'd have each other to hang around with. So I did agree. I agreed to go to band camp. It would be my first time away from home long term. To get ready for camp, 15-year-old me had taken private drum lessons for 2 years prior to sharpen my skills as a percussionist. Band camp would be the place. It would be the place I could learn and play with professionals and learn more than I ever could imagine at home. It turned out Mr. Rausch was right. The sunny drive downstate to the University of Illinois campus was filled with my mom's stories of farms, farmers, horses, and crop harvests.
When I was a little girl, we'd all get up in the morning at 4 a.m. and the first thing I did was run out to see our horses in my pajamas. How they got in my pajamas, I'll never know. They were my best friends back then. My mom would call me into breakfast and we ate fast in order to get out to do our chores. I really miss the smell of the animals and the barn. The sooner we finished our chores, the sooner I could go out and ride my horse, Blackie.
Our car was driven by my dad, Mom in the passenger seat, and me in the back seat. By 9 a.m., we arrived at the University of Illinois campus. It had been a 3.5-hour drive, the scenic way. There was a faster way, I was told, but not as scenic and rural. Many, many, many more small country towns to view and lots of farms. Keep in mind that my mom had been raised on a farm, so she loves seeing horses and she loved the smell of cow poop. I'll just leave it at that because I do know our olfactory senses, the sense of smell, can trigger great memories. For her, that's what it was. I guess I retell stories as well these days, so I have no space to complain. But pulling up to the dormitory, I recall my mom getting kind of misty-eyed as I got out of the car with my suitcase. I was 15 and I was trying so way hard to be cool because I was 15. I hugged my mom and dad and off they drove, probably taking the long way home to have that extended rural experience. Now, I knew if my mom missed me even half as much as she missed the farm smells, I was in pretty good standing. That day at Fell Hall, we received our clip-on photo IDs and immediately auditioned. There were a series of drum rudiments in which all percussionists had to perform to the best of their ability. There would be 2 large, full bands filled with brass, woodwinds, and of course percussion, a higher and a lower band, concert band and practical band.
2 bands.
There was an air of competition and seriousness as we were ranked and placed in the best band which matched our skills. Much later that day, my friends and I met up to see which list we were on, concert band or practical band.
What band are you in?
My friends were all placed in practical band.
What band are you in?
I had made the higher band, concert band.
There's my name, concert band.
That even surprised me. That was the last time, though, I saw any of them for the next 2 weeks. Our schedules were opposite of one another's. Even our free time was not synced. The result was that I met a lot of new people my age from all over the state, and my friendship circle got a little bigger with the kids from concert band.
Hello, I'm Paul.
We were all 15 or 16 years old, and we had music in common.
Memory flashes.
Now these days, most of my time spent at band camp are just flashes of certain memories, such as Flash. We had a cool older guy teach our drum section, and his name was Seb, probably short for Sebastian. And he was bound by a wheelchair, but he drummed thunderously when given drumsticks.
Good morning, drummers.
He was a kind, firm, and very professional man, not held back by not having the use of his legs. Seb was a smoker, and back then adults used to smoke in front of the kids. It was just accepted. It was cool because he always used to, when he wasn't smoking and was teaching, he would put his cigarettes in the spokes of his wheelchair. And so oftentimes when we'd push him from building to building, there'd be several cigarettes burning as the wheels spun. It was kind of like a carnival thing. It was pretty cool, I thought. One day we had drum sectional, and my time was off by a bit, and I arrived about 15 minutes early.
I'm early.
And I peered into the drum sectional room, and I saw Seb. He was walking around setting up for the day. He seemed to walk very easily and without any discomfort. His wheelchair sat in the center of the room, and I immediately felt uncomfortable. He's walking. Oh, good for him. That's great. Wait. How can he walk so well? What? Now, I have to tell you, that bothered me for many, many years after that, until I discovered that some people who have issues walking do have limited daily usage of their limbs each day until they tire. And then they have to rely on the wheelchair. And that must have been Seb's situation. Anyway, I'm not quite sure why it disturbed me that I saw him walking, but it did. Band camp brought me a girlfriend who lived in the same town as I did, and we became a couple after camp ended. She was bright, cute, and had a great sense of humor. I thought to myself,
yeah, Mom's gonna like her. I can take this one home.
Flash. We saw fireworks on July 4th. It was really cool. Flash. I purchased my first 8-track tape with my own money. It was a bootleg tape of Elton John's Honky Chateau album, and I bought it in a place called Campus Town, which was a downtown area for the University of Illinois campus. Kids, students. What could be cooler than buying something in a place called Campus Town? Flash. My roommate and I were goaded by, all I can say is they were bullies, into playing a pickup baseball game. They teased us, they made fun of us for every possible reason, and we were getting kind of mad about it. And so when my roommate got up to the plate,
Just pitch me a good one.
we both did the same thing. We both hammered that hard ball out of the field area. As they chased the ball the second time after I hit it, we just walked off to our dorm. It was karma, not talent. So overall, band camp was a quality time away from home with some realistic challenges. For drummers, it was a way to meet like-minded people regardless of their age or their abilities, and a very necessary way for me at that age to meet new people in my life and also say goodbye to some others. When my parents came to pick me up 2 weeks later, I felt differently. It felt like I'd grown up a bit. I began to set some goals for myself. I now was looking ahead and seeing what possibilities might be there. A year passed. I was 16 now and had earned a driver's license. Besides earning a driver's license, I'd also earned my parents' trust by following house rules and guidelines that were set for me. Later, my mom told me,
You were so easy to manage during your late teen years. Your sister was a good girl too. But you were always a rule follower.
It was early June, and summer was bearing down on us with blue, sunny skies, puffy clouds, and warm temperatures. You know, these are the kind of days you remember when you think back to when you were a kid. Yeah, my recollection at least. With my parents' permission, my 19-year-old sister Sue and I planned a trip to Illinois State University, where she attended college, so I could see the new house her sorority was building. We would have a place to stay. And as a college junior, Sue knew her way around the city of Normal, Illinois. Since earning my driver's license, I desperately wanted a road trip, something to initiate myself into the romance of the open road. My friend Fred and I had both read On the Road by Jack Kerouac, where the two main characters are admired for their carefree attitudes and their sense of adventure. Kerouac. See, I wanted to be that free-spirited maverick, even though I probably wasn't even close to it. I wanted to be eager to explore
On the road.
all kinds of things and be an inspiration to other people. So we asked our mom and dad if we could use the family's second car for about 5 days. And since we would be traveling together, our parents agreed. I was a rule follower, and my sister admittedly was a free spirit, not always bound by the constraints of life's rules and regulations. She wasn't a bad girl by any means, but she was always up for a change in plans when necessary. We were lucky to have such great parents. They were so well-intended, and they trusted us out on a road trip. It would be a 2.5-hour drive to the university, and I was excited. That summer, I did not attend band camp again. I had made the choice to focus on training and workouts. Football began early in August, and I needed to up my game in that situation. However, thinking about it, it was still early summer, and I knew a lot of my friends were headed to the University of Illinois' band camp from last year. Before we left, I asked my sister a question. I asked her if it was possible sometime during these 5 days we could drive over to the University of Illinois to spend a day there with some of my 15 and 16-year-old friends that I acquired from last year. After all, the University of Illinois was only about a half hour away from Illinois State.
Very close.
A strange look came over my sister's face. I could see she was thinking. Plans were changing. She told me,
Let me think about this.
I had expected my sister to say,
No, we're not doing that. We're not going over to your school.
So that response in itself was a surprise. We packed the car up, a 1971 bright gold Mercury Cougar, kind of a Ford Mustang of its day, and just before we got in, Sue pulled me aside and said, Listen.
My boyfriend Gary is in a car a block away from here, and all you have to do is drive me 1 block, and he and I will drive to Illinois State together. And then guess what?
What?
I asked.
You can go to the University of Illinois in Champaign and spend all 5 days with your friends. Well, okay.
I responded,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I was all in. This was my Jack Kerouac on the road first adventure moment. After quickly dropping off my sister with Gary, whom I had met and I'd liked previously, I began my solo journey, age 16, down the same rural country road my mom and dad had driven me a year prior, going to band camp. As I drove all by myself, I set the radio to top 40 music. WLS radio was a 50,000 watt blowtorch out of Chicago. The signal lasted all the way down to Florida. As I drove, I recalled the farm talk and the farm smells from the previous year. At times, it was kind of like the drive was still with my parents. It's like they were there because I remembered their comments. But in this situation, the radio music was much better. I was very aware that I was doing something that had not been approved by my parents, but I had that whole wanderlust thing, and there would be friends waiting for me at the end of the line in Champaign, Illinois. I was always the kind of kid that memorized the route when my dad drove. When we traveled in town, when we went on vacation and traveled out of state, I always remembered the exits and which direction was north and south. I don't know why I'm like that, but I just am. Somehow, driving down to the University of Illinois, I remembered all the turns. I recall them all. I'm sure I had a map with me, but of course, like being a guy, I never used it. What surprised me when driving is that I became overwhelmingly sleepy once. I pulled off at a farm stand and I bought 5 apples to eat. Now, fully awake, I motored solo into Champaign, Illinois around noon.
I made it.
Being all of 16 years old, my priority was to see my friends right away.
My schedule?
I had my band camp schedule from last year as well as my ID badge from last year.
My ID.
Just assuming that everything would be exactly the same can only come from a very immature mind. And that was me. I parked the car on a nearby street and I entered the dormitory, Fell Hall, from last year. I had people yelling my name right away.
Hey, Paul!
Hey, Paul!
Hey, is that you?
You here this year?
Sit with us. Hey, great to see you.
Were you back?
Hey, sit with us at lunch.
Come sit with us.
That made me smile and made me feel good.
Oh, I'm glad you're back.
And never for 1 second thought that I couldn't and I shouldn't be there. It never occurred to me. In the lobby, immediately I saw 3 of my close friends from the previous year. We laughed and talked about their day thus far. They didn't know that I wasn't a student there. I suggested we go to lunch in the cafeteria. I was hungry. We all went to the cafeteria and it felt like home. It felt like I should be there. As we entered, we had to show our ID badges, and I noticed mine was orange and everyone else's was red. What? Different colors? That day, I was able to slip in and enjoy a great dorm lunch. It never occurred to me that I shouldn't be eating for free. Around 7:30, after another great cafeteria dinner, I said my goodbyes.
Good night. See you tomorrow.
People had practicing to do, and it was then I realized that I had nowhere to sleep. I had $25 in my pocket and nowhere to go. I sat in my car and thought, and it was then that I recalled my friend Fred's brother, Steve Larson. He was president at the Chi Psi House. Now, it was summer, and the university was far less filled with students. I easily found the Chi Psi House by asking the first person I met on the street. I drove to the house, I parked in the back with 4 other cars, and excitedly entered the front door. Steve had spoken of the great guys that lived there. And immediately I found 5 fraternity brothers that were living there that summer. As I walked in, they were having a beer in front of the fireplace, and I introduced myself and my age, and connected myself as a friend of their president, Steve. Just as Steve had told me, these guys were happy, they were accommodating, they were kind, friendly. They welcomed me with open arms. I talked with a guy named Greg who showed me to the president's suite at the fraternity house. I said, "Wow, Greg, I don't expect to be in the best room in the house, just a place to sleep." Greg responded,
Nonsense, Paul. Come on. Any friend of our chapter president is fully welcome here.
Now, I was exhausted from the drive, and my entire day had been pretty full. I was sleepy. I slept in the president's room. It was a large bedroom.
Nice.
A college guy's bedroom. Sure, it smelled like a guy. Sure, Steve's clothes were scattered about. And sure, there was a personal minibar in the room and a private bathroom. The bed was king-sized and had multiple fluffy layers of blankets and oversized pillows. It's nice. I used that private bath daily, and I had a large breakfast each day with all 5 of the other Chi Psi brothers in their large dining area just off the kitchen. A house parent cooked, fried, baked each day. There were pancakes, waffles, eggs, bacon, cereal, orange juice, toast. It was all there. Plus, this guy baked all the time, too. Steve was right. I felt more than accepted at the Chi Psi house.
Have a seat. How'd you sleep?
I told stories about how Steve and I had played music together back at home, and I was actually a friend of Steve's younger brother. We talked about girls. We talked about college preparatory classes and stories funnier than I had ever heard before. Definitely a National Lampoonish type of humor. I was happy and contented. 16 years old, and it was nested in the Chi Psi fraternity house. After breakfast on day 2, I asked Greg, do you guys have any permanent markers? I need a red one. Being a graphic artist major, Greg took my old Bandcamp ID, and in 5 minutes he repurposed it into a current ID. Now, he took a great deal of pride and detail in the accuracy, and he asked if I could write him a letter of recommendation, jokingly, if it passed inspection, and it did.
Nice. Good job.
I spent my days in Fell Hall, with my friends, old and new, at band camp in between their sessions. During sessions, I drove to visit a guy I had met named Carl, who wanted to form a band when I came to school at the University of Illinois in a few years. We jammed mid-morning and we jammed mid-afternoon. Sometimes I played drums, sometimes I played piano. We were out in his garage. I thought to myself,
Fred would really like this guy's talent and his vocals. I think he'd bring a lot to the music we're performing. I hope Fred comes to college here too.
Carl and I actually wrote an original song that sounded like a hit to me. I love the rhythm part of it. It was creative, it was exciting, it was a great time we were having together. We were making good use of our time. There were no limitations, no limits of actual responsibility. So we wrote and we played music. Each day his mom brought out graham crackers and made us red Kool-Aid, and we drank it from these green plastic cups that smelled like green plastic cups when you tipped them up to drink. Neighborhood girls stopped by to hear us play. That was different for me. And by day 2, one girl named Natalie brought a bass and played along with us.
This is great.
Something was happening here. Exciting times. Why didn't I live in Champaign, Illinois? Each day, I always made it back to the dormitory for dinner with my best buddies at band camp. I felt that this daily ritual could have gone on and filled my entire summer with music, friendship, and happiness. We could share it all. Each night I bunked, all by myself comfortably, at the Kai Sai house, in a bed that was so comfortable that to this day I still think about it. The only hiccup, and it wasn't a big thing. One night around 2 a.m. I was awakened by someone entering the room and turning the light on where I was sleeping. They wanted to use the room, but this guy was cool and he quickly apologized and left.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know there was somebody in here.
Living there was like having 5 older brothers around that all looked out for one another, and me. At breakfast the next morning, we laughed about the intruder in the room, and we laughed also about an article in the newspaper about a University of Illinois student who was expelled for putting a laugh track on a speech given by the university president and then submitting it for a grade. This was done on film, as video had not hit the consumer market yet, so this was unique for the time and very clever to boot. The days flew by, and I had plenty of time to think. Think about life, think about the future. And except for the car, absolutely no responsibilities. None.
Nope.
Just assuming that everything would work out effortlessly comes from a very immature mind. That was me. Probably one of my favorite experiences that week was at band camp. I attended a mandatory meeting in Fell Hall. It was to warn the band camp kids of some person sneaking onto campus to eat and hang around. They actually scanned my badge that night, but no alarm sounded. However, that was my first reality check.
I'm not supposed to be here. Oh my gosh. I'm mooching
This is wrong.
free stuff.
What I'm doing
Oh no.
is wrong.
So, the immature mind can learn. Okay. On day 5, I said goodbye to my band camp friends.
You guys are the best. So long.
I played one last jam with Carl and the neighborhood band.
Paul, you gotta come back.
And finally I left to pick up my stuff at the Kai Sai house, where the following conversation took place with Greg.
Hey, Paul. I talked to Steve this morning, and he's coming down.
Oh, today's the day I head home, Greg. Tell me, what do I owe you guys? What can I pay you guys for?
Steve said that he doesn't have any brothers.
Fred. Fred is his brother.
Wait, Paul, what's Steve's last name?
Larson. Steve Larson.
Our president is Steve Anderson.
Huh. What? Really?
Then Greg said,
Dude, I'm not sure you're at the right fraternity.
I'm sorry, man. Really, what can I do?
After a pause, Greg paused, and he thought for a while. Then he looked at me and said,
You know what? You are an okay guy, and you've been upfront with us this whole time. I think this was just a mix-up. Let's just shake on it.
We did. And with that, Greg and a couple of the other frat brothers came out to my car, out in the driveway, and as I drove away, they waved. They even gave me gas coupons, which filled my gas tank. I felt thankful, but yet I felt absolutely terrible. But I learned something that day about forgiveness and helping others, even the ignorant. My mom and dad were not told the story until we were close to being 30 years old, and the only one that commented was my mom, and she said,
Oh, I'm so glad I never knew about this. It's probably good you didn't tell me.
I would never attempt this kind of unplanned carelessness again in my life. Why did everything happen so perfectly? Well, that's why I thank God every day. As I drove home, I remember thinking, if this is what living away from home is like, then I cannot wait for that day. But the reality was, I was having my own version of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you remember in that movie, everything always seems to go right for Ferris. During my 5-day trip to Champaign, everything went better than expected for me, not even a flaw. As a side note, many months later when I talked to Steve Larson when Fred and Steve came to play music, I told Steve about my adventure and stopping and staying at the Kai Sai house. Steve laughed and he said, Paul, I was president there about 1.5 years ago. I'm not sure anybody even remembers me. And then he said, but yeah, they are a great bunch of guys. And you know what? I couldn't agree more. For life's learning curve and all the inspirers and supporters of people out there, I'm Paul Hart.
My Kerouac summer.
Life's Learning Curve is put together by producer Paul Hart with assistance by Tim Doherty, Mike Peterson, and Sebastian T. Dog. We're mixed by Heidi Cerner, technical director Helen McDonald. As always, music and audio assistance by Riley Hart. Our podcast content is intended for entertainment purposes only. Some voices were digitally enhanced. On today's show, special thanks to Steve Larson. Check out our website, lifeslearningcurve.org, and leave a comment. But please subscribe because we'd love to have you. As always, find us on Facebook and Instagram, and listen to us almost everywhere podcasts are heard. We're now on Pandora. I'm Paul Hart, and we will be back soon with more from Life's Learning Curve. We're clear. We're clear. We're clear.